When you go online and start searching apartments for rent in New York City, do you ever pay attention to the building type? If you have no idea what I'm talking about, or maybe you do pay attention and notice the building types, but you're not quite sure what are the differences and how this affects your application and approval process, then this video is for you. Before we start, I need to clarify one thing. When I say building type, I don't mean the size, shape, interior design, or the amenities that the building offers. While those are also important to consider, this is not a topic that we're going to talk about today. When I say building type, I mean the ownership structure. Let's say we go online and we want to see properties for rent in Manhattan. We have more than 6,000 search results. From here, pretty much everyone knows that you need to have a budget. What's the maximum amount you want to spend on your rent? How many bedrooms you need. If you have pets, you might only want to see places where pets are allowed. If there are any specific amenities that you absolutely need, such as washer dryer, dishwasher, outdoor space, doorman, and so on, you can also filter by amenities. Seems pretty straightforward, but this is where it gets confusing. When I go to more, scroll down, this is what we're going to talk about today. Building types. At the end of this video, you will know the important differences between those building types and how this will affect your application and approval process as a renter. It is very important when you're scrolling through the listings to always pay attention to the building type. You'll see it here: rental unit, co-op, condo. Now let's go back to the building type filter. If you're not looking to rent an entire townhouse, you are most likely looking to rent an apartment. You can rent apartments in condos, co-ops, or rental buildings. We're not going to talk about auctions, land, or timeshares, since those don't apply to 99.9% of people watching this. There is also the fourth type of building that you might come across, which is called a condo. It's not listed here, and there are not a lot of condos in New York City. But condo basically is a hybrid that includes both condominium and cooperative ownership structures. Not to complicate today's video, I will make a whole separate video explaining condo ownership structure. But if you come across a condo for sale or for rent and have questions about it, my email is in the description of this video, so feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer your questions. So in today's video, we're talking about the differences between apartments for rent in co-ops, condos, and rental buildings. Co-op is a cooperative corporation that owns the entire multi-unit building. Every apartment has a specific number of shares allocated to it. We're only going to discuss the things that you need to know as a renter. I already made videos explaining all the details you need to know as a buyer, so if you're interested in learning more, I will also put the links of those videos in the description below. As a renter, what you need to know is, with co-ops, your approval is a two-step process. Co-ops are run by a board of directors, and every resale or sublet application has to be approved by the board. When you're renting an apartment in a co-op, the owner of that apartment doesn't own a real property. They own the shares that are allocated to that apartment. That's why a lot of times you will hear the word shareholder when referring to a co-op unit owner. First, you have to be approved by the shareholder, then you have to be approved by the board of directors. And it doesn't matter if you're approved by the shareholder and have a signed lease. The board can still reject your application if you don't meet the building's requirements. So the application and approval process for co-ops will be the following. First, you will apply and submit all the necessary paperwork that is required by the shareholder. After you're approved by the shareholder, you will sign the sublease agreement with them. Then you need to prepare and submit a board package. Some co-ops are very strict and require a lot of documentation, and other co-ops can be more relaxed. So it really depends on the building. The typical documents that a lot of co-ops might require are your pay stubs, bank statements, tax returns, W-2 forms, letter of employment stating your base salary, position held, and your start date, signed by your current supervisor. Also, current landlord reference letter, personal and professional reference letters, proof of any assets you have, such as stocks, bonds, and real estate. They will check your credit score, and you have to fill out a co-op sublease application form and complete the financial statement forms. The board will review your application, and if everything looks good to them, you will receive an interview invitation. This is not a job interview where you're trying to impress your employer. This interview is basically for them to see you and to make sure that you are who you claim to be in your application. And once you're approved by the board, then you can start scheduling your move-in date. With condos, the process is similar with a few key differences. Condo is an apartment building where all the units are individually owned and the owners of each unit have a joint ownership in the common elements of the building. Remember, with co-ops, the apartment owners don't own a real property, but instead they own shares in a corporation. With condos, the unit owners own the actual unit and it is a real property. Condo buildings are run by a board of managers. When you're renting an apartment in a condo building, first you have to be approved by the unit owner. Then once you sign a lease with the unit owner, a lot of condos also have a board package that you will need to complete and submit. But the key difference here is condo boards cannot just reject your application. They have what's called a right of first refusal. I explain more details about right of first refusal in this video. But if you don't care about all the details, just know that a right of first refusal means that condo board has the right to purchase the unit or lease the unit first with the same price and terms as you agreed with the owner. So if co-op boards can just reject your application without having any obligation to do something in return, whether it's a resale or sublet, if condo boards don't want that specific resale or rental transaction to go through, they have to exercise their right of first refusal and buy or rent the unit themselves with the same price and terms as you agreed with the owner. When you submit your condo board package, you're not waiting for an approval or rejection. Basically, you're waiting to see if condo board decides to exercise or waive its right of first refusal. And for most condos, there is no interview requirement. So once the board waives its right of first refusal, then you're all set and you can start scheduling your move-in. In terms of the required paperwork, it all depends on that specific condo building. There are condos that have a basic application and only require you to sign a few acknowledgement forms, and other condos will require almost everything I mentioned earlier for co-ops. Before we move on, I would appreciate if you just like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're getting any value from this video so far. Thank you for doing so. Now let's talk about rental buildings. Those are buildings that are typically owned by one or multiple people or a company, and the apartments inside are rental units. Those are typically run by third-party management companies. The process of application and approval most of the time are a lot faster in rental buildings compared to condos and co-ops. And usually they just require the most basic information, such as your proof of income and your credit report. Some of them might want to see a few more documents, such as a reference letter from your current landlord or a bank statement and things like that. But most of the time, the application paperwork is not as lengthy as you see in co-ops or condos. Usually your application is reviewed either by the landlord or sometimes by the management company, and once you're approved, you sign the lease, transfer all the necessary funds, and you can schedule your move-in date. Two important things that you should always ask the listing agent are the required documents for the application, which we already talked about earlier, and the timeline. Generally speaking, on average, in my experience, it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get approved in a co-op. But for some co-ops, it might even take 4 to 6 weeks to go through an approval process and get all the paperwork done. This usually depends on the management company and the board. But I also have seen co-ops that are much faster and get everything done within a week. For condos, after submitting your board package, some buildings can take a few days and some can take a lot longer. But on average for condos, I see things are getting done in about 1 to 2 weeks. But again, this depends on the management and the board. Rental buildings most of the time are the fastest and typically take a few days up to a week, but in some cases maybe 2 weeks or more depending on the management. This is important to know so you can properly plan your move-in. A lot of times the listing agent will not be able to tell you any specific timeline, but if they have done any past deals in the building, they'll probably be able to give you a general estimation. That's it for today. Hopefully this video helped you to understand how the process works depending on the building type if you're trying to rent an apartment in New York City. If you have any specific questions, you can just comment down below or reach out to me using my email in the description of this video or DM me on Instagram. to book your free one-on-one consultation with me if you're looking to buy, sell, or rent here in New York City, or if you just have questions regarding New York City real estate. If you got any valuable information, it helps me a lot if you just like the video and subscribe to the channel for more real estate videos like this. And lastly, click the video you see on your screen if you want to learn more about New York City real estate. Thanks for watching. Until next time.